Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Max Elster, CEO and founder of Minoa, a go-to-market platform that's raised $2.7 million in funding. Max, what's going on?
Brad, good to see you.
How does it feel being a guest? I know you were a podcast host for a very long time. How does it feel being a guest?
It feels great, especially with somebody that you can ask good questions, right? It's fun to have conversation and sit on the other side. Sometimes I kind of tend to ask questions myself and ask them back to you because of that history, but I will try to shy away from that a little bit today.
Set high expectations here. All of our top episodes tend to be podcast hosts who are now our guests. So high expectations for what we do here.
I'm going to try my best. I think let's make it mutually successful.
Let's do it. So talk to us about what you're building there.
Yeah, so I think just to give a bit of background. So I was kind of product lead 2.5 years ago for a CSP company, still back in days. I lived in Zurich and Berlin, and then basically the office was kind of New York and Zurich. And one of the big problems I saw when I was a product manager was whenever you work in product, you build new functionality, you build new use cases, and you try to serve the go-to-market team in basically giving them additional power to actually sell and upsell and sell additional products. And I think one of the big problems I saw was that there's a big disconnect between everything that we were building in product and go-to-market as a whole. And the underlying reason was that we built all the functionality, but we had to somewhat convert it into a language that customer success managers, sellers, and everybody on the go-to-market team could understand. And that unified language is something that a lot of companies struggle with. And oftentimes it comes down to the actual value that you're creating, right? Because customers, whether it's a mid-market or an enterprise company, they don't just buy a feature and functionality. They want to buy an outcome to their business, right? They want to increase their revenue. They want to save costs. They have certain risk composures that they're interested to improve, right? So they have different kind of variations of what they're trying to accomplish. And what Minoa essentially does is we're building a value intelligence platform, which allows every go-to-market team to first understand what is our value framework? How should we be selling? What are the use cases we should be selling to our customers? And is that industry specific? Is that persona specific? And then customer success managers, sellers, SEs, and everybody within the go-to-market team can utilize that in order to build a business case, to showcase value to customers, to use it post-signature as they're trying to validate the value that they're actually hypothetically realizing. And then you can actually start realizing with customers and have a lot of kind of tips and tricks potentially for early stage founders and everybody that's kind of thinking about how to sell to mid-market enterprise and how to better connect everything you're building with kind of go-to-market maybe in a good way. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun kind of solving my own problem from back in the days to using AI to make that workflow smarter and more intelligent from pre-sales to post-sales.
Just to help visualize that, is there a case study or a customer that you can kind of talk us through just to visualize a bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, we work with different companies in the Bay Area and in Europe, probably some notable names, Event, Personio, which is kind of a big HR tech platform in Europe. Pendo is another customer, and then we work with different vertical SaaS companies in different categories. So for example, one of the interesting part was we had one customer who initially had a 10-person solution engineering team. And those solution engineers, they did all the demos, they did kind of the solution scoping for customers, and they got pulled into many of the different conversations by sellers of thinking about, okay, how do we convert feature functionality and demo into a business value statement that can be digested by a buyer, whether it's a CFO, whether it's a chief revenue officer, or whether it's in this case, an HR leader. And the big question was, how do we best convert that and make it digestible? And how can we use all these different data points that sit in Gong, in our kind of internal value framework, and bring it all together to help an executive buyer understand what is the purpose of even looking at this and how do I decide whether they want to buy it or not? And that's kind of where we actually not just equip those 10 initial sales engineers to have something at their fingertips that they could use in every single deal, but the ultimate goal was every single AE in the company should be able to build a business case at scale for every single opportunity. And it's quite hard if you do that in a spreadsheet, spread it across different systems. And we basically combine all these different data points to help them build a better, more personalized business case that they can use in every single deal, and basically had great adoption. And now that led to kind of higher win rates, faster basically deal closures, because people on the other side, on the customer side, were able to finally understand, okay, I get it from a feature perspective, but what is the value that you're delivering to me? And that's kind of what it resulted to. And yeah, it's been a great success journey. I work with the company for over a year now and kind of going to phase 2 now, which is exciting.
Sounds like the AEs or the sales engineers, that's the actual user. Who are you selling to? Is it like director of sales, director of product? Does it depend? What does that look like?
Yeah, usually it's a combination. It's definitely like we need sales leaders to be on board. It's a methodology perspective, right? Because they have a certain methodology in place. Often they want to move away from feature selling to value-based selling and they want to get better at it. And then tooling accommodates that kind of progression from left to right, basically. And then oftentimes we have sales engineering leaders who are involved, and then ultimately a chief revenue officer approves the budget. There's an interesting concept in larger organizations that also have so-called value engineers. And the value engineers are a great persona to also administer some of the frameworks and kind of the initial setup of our platform. It doesn't have to be, right? We have like 50% of customers have a value engineer, 50% don't. But value engineers are this interesting persona where back in the days, SAP, Salesforce, Adobe, they all had bigger value engineering teams. And they were basically helping the go-to-market journey in really thinking about the value part of your sales process. And now we see that it's an augmented process with humans and AI, and basically where it comes together to help the customer understand the why of their decisions and why they should make a certain purchase or not.
Is there a certain company size where you start to see them having value engineers?
It's earlier than ever. We initially was multi-billion-dollar companies. In the last, I would say like 4 to 5 years, it has basically come down to companies even at 10, 20 million in revenue. They either hire somebody that has that particular role, or they task somebody internally to say, you're going to take care of this. And it can be product marketing, can be a sales engineer, can be sometimes sellers that are very much good at value-based selling, right? And they take control of that framework and the idea behind it. It really depends on the company. We do know companies that have moved on and actually call them outcome engineers, or like basically outcome representatives within the company. It's all about outcome. It's all about impact, all about value. And that's kind of what it ties to. But it's earlier than ever. I've talked to some chief revenue officers that have approached me in the past of like, hey, I'm like 15 million revenue and we want to get to 50 now. Do you have anybody that could kind of lead our value initiatives internally? And then I might have some contacts. So that's been interesting in the past.
You know, I've studied Gainsight a lot. Not sure if you've looked into what they're doing with customer success, but their story, I think, is very similar, where you saw this kind of growing title of customer success manager. It said, we're going to serve the hell out of you better than anyone else can. We're going to arm you with purpose-built tools. And then as that grew, they grew as well. Is it a similar thought for you? You identified this ICP, you know it's going to continue to grow, and you're just going to be the platform to really serve them?
Yeah, I think Gainsight is an incredible example. I think they've done a fantastic job of really evangelizing the story on customer success managers. I think ultimately we believe that the value engineers are almost like the enablers and orchestrators of the right way of thinking about outcomes within your company, which every company should be thinking about as soon as they hit a certain maturity level. I think more importantly, though, as AEs and as sellers in general, whether it's a founder who does founder-led sales or whether it's a sales team itself, as they are thinking about how to best distribute the right level of personalization, the right level of collaterals to a customer that's like focused on value, I think in general, companies should be prioritizing it, right? And I think that's kind of where basically there's not a specific moment in time, but I think for us, there's a category building aspect of evangelizing that it's an important role to be thinking about as early as possible, right? Whether that's an internal person that you give additional kind of focus area and maybe a little project to kind of work on, or whether it's a dedicated hire. But yeah, I think we're riding the wave and we're using the opportunity as more and more value engineers are tapping into different companies, but it's not a necessity to be successful, I think, for the company.
What are you doing to evangelize that and educate the market?
A couple of different things. I mean, we basically have our own kind of internal customer advisory board, which we call the Star Path Collective, coming back to kind of the origin story of Minoa, which was an ancient Greek society. And they basically used the stars to navigate the uncharted waters and basically navigate the world. And we believe that the Star Path Collective best represents the idea of kind of bringing our customers together to navigate uncertain waters and kind of go to the next step of their go-to-market journey. So the Star Path Collective is a great way of kind of bringing those people together and evangelizing within our ecosystem of customers. And they are going to spread the word to their friends and colleagues and partners. And that's kind of one big part, that just like utilize the customers you already have. And then we basically do LinkedIn content. We try to basically present our narrative and the vision to basically kind of larger folks through LinkedIn, or we also kind of started different webinars with different go-to-market leaders where we spread the message. That's just the early start of the journey, though. We're like actively thinking about how we can do more of it, right? I think there's so much that you can do in order to evangelize a certain movement. And we're also trying to get better. I don't think we're there yet in terms of the final outcome.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
What's on the list of ways you're considering evangelizing this movement?
I always come back to, I think, the customers, right? I think the customers are the best people to tell a story about what they have achieved with your product. And if you can ask them and come back to them and say, hey, like, why did you initially buy? And what do you think what do you think the future holds for you? I think they have a lot of great and interesting insights that you can then use to capitalize on that story. There's a couple of different things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get more active on LinkedIn. That's a big theme for me. I'm trying to partner with different companies that have already been successful, right? And be present at their events, but also try to have conversations with them and see how they think about the future. One great company or a few great companies that are in this space are Winning by Design, Force Management. They have all been kind of evangelizing some of the initial methodologies of why it's important to think more about value and outcomes as you're doing go-to-market. And I think really learning from them and thinking about what does kind of the next wave also look like in terms of go-to-market and how do you tie into that strategy and then evangelize together as an overall market is something that we're currently exploring more and more. And that's been great. And hopefully that we will do more of it. I'm definitely curious to hear your feedback. You're the expert on that part. So anything that you have.
You need to have a podcast. That's the biggest no-brainer.
I heard so. Yeah, I think it comes back to the roots, I guess, right?
We had Godard Abel on the show probably 2 years ago. He's the founder of
Yeah, no.
You're asking him the number one piece of advice for anyone who wants to create a category. And it was similar to what you just described. Go partner with others in the ecosystem, even partner with competitors, work together to really evangelize it, convince the endless firms that there's a need. And then that's how the category really takes shape. So it sounds like you're taking that approach.
Yeah, Godard is a good example. First of all, he's German as well. He initially immigrated into Germany when he was like 10, 15, I think. So I've talked to him a couple of times as well. He's fantastic and a great leader. And what's interesting about G2 is we did co-create the G2 category around value-based selling tools. So we were one of the first like 2 or 3 players that G2 talked to in order to better understand what is this category all about, right? Because it's not another category that exists in go-to-market. I think it's new for a lot of people to explore what it actually means to buy software in this category. And G2 was super early on their initial research and development of thinking about where's this market going. Same with Gartner. Gartner has a couple of different experts in kind of this whole tool category that continues to write about the effect and the impact of those tooling categories. And it's been great. I think like we're still on that kind of leading charge on G2 and we're trying to push it further and ask our customers to be involved and share their story on G2. And I think that's a great platform to evangelize yourself further. I kind of missed that when you asked me what we've done in the past.
On the G2 side, how long did that take you from your start until it was on G2 for the category?
Yeah, I think not too long, actually. I think it was like a half a year roughly. So what we did, we continuously talked about it. I connected with different researchers that I've kind of noticed that were G2 researchers talking about the importance of pre-sales tools in general and just shared my thoughts. I didn't have actually any like idea that they could be launching this category in the near future. And we always had good conversation. And I shared my personal story of what I'm seeing every single week of talking to revenue leaders, SE leaders, and kind of basically reflected it back to them. And I think at some point they heard it probably from different areas. And they thought about, okay, why don't we make it easier for buyers to potentially find tooling in that category? So they started, and they wrote a whole like article about it, which I thought was great. And I think it's just about building honest and kind of good relationships based on just like your interest in learning what they see and they are interested in learning what you see. And then at some point, it can be helpful for anybody wanting to build a category.
What was the impact of you getting that G2 category created? I'm sure everyone listening in is thinking like, yeah, that sounds great. Also, I think the general wisdom is that category creation is hard, it's slow, it's expensive. For you, 6 months doesn't sound like that much. How much time did you have to put into it? Was it a crazy amount of time or was it a pretty light lift overall?
I think there's a difference between category creation and category utilization, it feels like almost, where like category creation, I think is hard enough, but I think oftentimes category creation gets mistaken by as soon as a category gets created, everything blows up, right? And I think category creation is oftentimes just a starting point. You have to be at the right place. You have to constantly evangelize new buyers, right? Usually category creation hits those early adopters and people that are interested in identifying new areas and new improvement for their go-to-market motion in our case. And you have to be there, right? I think that's important. And you have to be defining the category with, for example, G2 in this case, and you have to help them also adjust kind of what it's all about. I think when it comes to utilization of category, we're still very much at the early days, right? So even though it was created 6 months after we thought about it, I wouldn't necessarily say like we have fully capitalized on it, right? I think buyers are still looking at traditional categories and they're now just looking at adjacent categories, especially in this kind of wave of AI, where they think about, okay, what are ways to drive our efficiency within the company? And then they, of course, look at new categories that have been established. And that's kind of where I think this falls into. We have seen great success, especially as buyers are listening to G2, they are listening to Gartner, and they're also utilizing systems like ChatGPT and Perplexity and others to build shortlists for problems they have. That's kind of what I've been noticing in the past couple months or so, is that people are actively going into kind of different LLMs to shortlist different vendors to see which kind of problems do they have and how can tooling actually help, and then make a decision. And oftentimes what I've been noticing is that ChatGPT and others, they do actually reference G2 as part of their sources, right? So if you are not there, if you're not existing in your category, it's going to be hard for ChatGPT to shortlist you, right? So that's kind of something that we've been noticing, or what could be good learning for other startups to definitely check out. If you look for your category, go into the sources, see what's being referenced, and try to be active there. And there are good different experts out there that can help you probably with kind of AI SEO, but I'm definitely not the expert there, but I've definitely kind of observed some trends.
Going to be an expert there because we just got our first customer through ChatGPT 2 weeks ago. And we just have, from how us, and they send ChatGPT. So I'm meeting to ask them more questions and to understand it. But that, and then like all over my LinkedIn feed, I'm sure your LinkedIn's the same. Everyone's starting to talk about this. I'm like, oh, we just got our first customer. We're starting to get customers, getting interest from ChatGPT. So we're going to get AI. So it sounds like there's for sure a massive market there, a massive opportunity. What are they calling it again? It's GEO, I think, right? Isn't it GEO?
Yeah, I think there's a specific name for it. I'm blanking on it right now, but definitely there's a new category that I think is being established.
What else from a growth perspective are you doing? How are you driving growth?
Yeah, a couple of different things. I mean, we have kind of pretty consistent kind of like divergence between inbound and outbound. We do outbound, we build kind of key target account lists through our ICP. I think we've gotten a better understanding over time who are we trying to target, especially in kind of vertical software and like different software vendors that are interesting based on history with the existing customers. So we've tried to get better and better and better and constantly refine the ICP. I think there's always room for improvement. I don't think we've ever cracked that yet. So that's one thing. And then inbound, what I've definitely been noticing is that the more content my co-founder and I create, the more inbound we get. And that's kind of a big one. And then oftentimes we've built this small community of advisors that we incentivize as part of our journey, which I've gotten from kind of a friend of mine and kind of an advisor, the founder of Sendoso, and Chris Rudegrab has actually done a pretty good job at building kind of like this team of advisors that are all trying to support him and the team on the journey of building Sendoso. And he kind of advised me of, hey, like you're on go-to-market, try to just build couple of good advisor relationships with people that are in your space, and then ask them for intros, ask them for help on your product roadmap, right? And that's been working super well. So we just openly reached out to people that we've already been in touch with, that we liked and appreciated as humans, and that were generally good, that we wanted to have them on board, and that oftentimes had a certain level of expertise or interest in what we're building. We brought them on board, and I talk to them every other month or so, every quarter. And then whenever I see somebody that's kind of connected to them, I kind of use them for an introduction. That's been working super well. And I send them monthly updates. I give them an oversight of kind of where the company is going. And I think that's just been super, super helpful as we leverage network in the right way, and just gives you those warm intros, I think, these days that are always helpful to grow.
How would you incentivize them? Is it advisory shares? Is it paying them cash? Does it just depend?
Yeah, advisory shares. And then if prospect converts into a customer, I send them a bottle of wine or something.
That's smart. What have you learned from building out that advisory board? I know that's something that I'm seeing talked about a lot on LinkedIn. A lot of founders I know are talking about that. Doesn't have to be painful lessons, but if there are painful lessons, share them. Otherwise, just any lesson will do.
I think don't overcomplicate it. I think that's kind of what I learned from Chris, right? Essentially, there are a lot of great leaders out there that want to help startups and that want to help people, especially young people, to be successful. Leverage that for your own benefit, right? Just say, hey, like we're trying to build this kind of market. We're trying to build this company. These are the challenges we have. We want to bring on board good and the right people that are interested in helping us. And we thought you could be a great fit, right? And are you interested? And oftentimes that leads to the best and easiest conversation you can have, right? People are going to say, hey, by the way, I love your space. I love the category. I just had an example from a couple of days ago where we talked to a prospect that actually came inbound, and we had a couple of different great conversations. In that first call, I was so amazed by how he thought about the vision of what he would love to see with the category evolving and kind of how our solution adapts to it. He actually left then to join a different company, but I stayed in touch, and he will become an advisor now. And he already actually referred me to a couple of potential customers, and he's so engaged and interested in seeing the success of the company because it's basically his personal mind that he wrote down in different mind maps, productized in a product that we're building, that he wants to be on board, right? And there's no better way to actually kind of mutually match your interests if that works out in a different way.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their U.S. and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
Is there a size that's like too big? Is it like, have you figured that out or are you thinking about that now? Like, do you have 20 people or is 20 not feasible?
Good question. I think there are different people that have like different number of advisors. I think we're still like below 10. So it's kind of tough to say whether at some point it's going to get too much. I think it just has to be distributed differently, right? I assume at some point you just have to think about how do you best inform everybody on how it's going and then kind of how do you make sure that those monthly updates or whatever you're sending out they are fruitful and whether people are reading it. Otherwise, I think, there's probably no limit. I would just be careful of like who you bring in, make sure that they are vetted against the right interests and do you like them as a person, right? Because you're essentially going to somewhat work with them, even if it's just every other month through a call or something.
What other go-to-market thoughts do you have? When we look at go-to-market, obviously there's, founders listening in. What, point of views do you have? What do you believe that maybe goes against what others believe? Anything like that come to mind?
I mean, maybe it's biased and selfish, but I think it's based on a lot of unique insight we have in the kind of category we're building. You can solve everything around pipeline, but if you don't get your mid-funnel in the right working, you're also going to lose, right? And I think that's where I think a lot of the tendencies arise where a lot of companies try to focus on the top funnel, just try to generate more leads. But they see that they have massive drops through the mid to later stages of the funnel. I think it's always important to just look at why do you actually lose deals, right? Why do you win them? What's the pattern there? And how does that come back to kind of that middle part where oftentimes that's where no decisions are being made, right? The buyer sits on the other side and they love the demo. They love you as a person when they talk to you and they really enjoy those conversations. But then in the midst of the funnel, when it gets a little more complex and they have to advance internally, drive additional decisions and make sure that the buying committee on how many people they are going to be, they on board, they want to pursue as well. That's oftentimes where deals get lost. And oftentimes as founders, we think all about kind of, okay, let's build leads and let's try to bring them to the funnel. But there's less focus about thinking about what do you actually need to do in order to convert somebody from mid-funnel to the late stages so they're convinced that you're the vendor of choice and they want to move forward. I think that's where it gets more complicated. So think about even looking at your CRM and seeing where you have drop-off rates and build collaterals around where you see the drop-off rates to make sure that basically nothing gets lost there and you have more and more companies that don't just end up in no decision. I think that's just been a big part for us, but also then for the startups that I'm talking to. And then I think Jason Lemkin has a lot of kind of interesting insights on when to hire, right? I still do very much enjoy founder-led sales. I'm building the playbook as we speak. I'm working with one person on our team to kind of make sure that we follow the right playbooks and we document a lot of the stuff that we're building. And then he kind of also then continues to build the flywheel and outbound. And I think that's it, right? You don't need more than that, especially in this time of kind of utilizing different tools and AI software these days.
Something else you mentioned a few minutes ago, posting on social. Talk to us about the founder-led marketing approach.
It's hard. And I think the hardest part is driving consistency, right? I also sometimes fall off kind of the consistency there. So whoever is listening, I think if you do, you're not alone, we all, I think, do it. It's interesting though. I think what's been working well for me, and I've kind of had numerous inbound leads that come in and said, hey, I've actually been following your content for a while and I've really enjoyed the depth of your insight. So I think what I've been kind of just trying to double down on, it shouldn't be just superficial content just to get something out there. I'm trying to think about the unique angles that we're seeing, talking to so many people every week, that there's already so much content and insight in those conversations that you could then actually better utilize for content and for especially LinkedIn. So that's just been the big one. And never underestimate the number of people that are actually reading your content but not interacting, right? I think the number of conversations that I've had of hey, I've seen you be way more active and I really enjoyed the content, that I've never, ever interacted with any of my posts is super, super interesting. And I think what I've been listening to lately was this kind of shift from, it's basically LinkedIn and some of these channels, they are much more focused on your interest versus your following. So it kind of moves away from just you have 10,000 followers and they might actually never see your content to even more of an interest, whatever you're currently interested in. Those algorithms will try to surface that better for you, no matter if you follow these people or not. And I think that's might be an opportunity for all of us because we could now create content that's evergreen, that's relevant. And then LinkedIn will actually try to distribute it to the people that find it most interesting. And it doesn't necessarily have to be your followers, which I think is a great opportunity, especially if you've been building your community now for a couple of years on LinkedIn and maybe a completely different category than what you're actually trying to get out to. But if you build the right content, maybe it will actually reach the right people that are interested in your way of thinking.
What's your most popular post or most engaged post that you've done so far?
That's a great question. I think it was a free giveaway. So we created this ROI, it was ROI templates because a lot of early stage startups were asking for it, but then also some of our prospects of hey, do you have some templates of how we could even think about our value prop? Which I find interesting. That's even a question, but we try to then like take all of our learnings together with some kind of AI and then basically created a template or different templates for different kind of ways of thinking about ROI and benefits in general. And basically just did a little post that was like a small GIF and of explaining kind of why we did it. And I think, it had definitely lots of like, I think a couple of hundred comments if I'm not remember correctly, but that was very successful and definitely something we repeated a couple of times. Didn't work out great every single time, but I think for that particular post, it was great.
So it was one of those like in the comments or, comment this word, we'll send it to you.
Yeah. Right. That's it.
I feel like those or I don't know how effective they're going to be in 6 months because everyone seems to be doing this now.
Yeah, like we've also moved on, right? And I actually think like what we've created, the templates they were like thought through. We definitely heard it like multiple times. So I don't think actually content will land. I'm also not the biggest fan of just creating content and then actually not sending people like the actual collateral. Like they ask for it, they put in work to comment, like definitely give it to them. Don't make it just kind of awareness game. I don't think that will ultimately work.
Yeah, it's burning relationships before you even have the relationship to burn, which is kind of crazy when I see that.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's do a final question. I'm seeing we're over on time now, or up on time. So let's zoom out 3 to 5 years from today. What does your company look like and what does go-to-market look like in general?
I think, of course, AI is an incredible influence. We're moving away from not just, I think, using AI for kind of low complexity, high volume tasks, but also to become your kind of assistant next to you that continuously helps you on solving different challenges. I think where I think go-to-market will go towards is a high degree of personalization. Everybody within a company will become a subject matter expert on their specific vertical, on their specific market, and will be able to personalize at scale. I think it's something that we haven't really been able to do, right? If you think about just velocity sales and go-to-market where you have to close a lot of deals every single month, it's very hard to personalize at scale for every single company. And I think that's just going to be fascinating to see when there's a high degree of personalization for every single touch point in the go-to-market journey. We want to be facilitating part of that. But of course, there's many other vendors that have different kind of areas of the go-to-market journey that they are facilitating. So I think personalization would be a big one. I think kind of the other part is that as technology and product building will become easier and easier, right? Everybody can spin up a lovable instance these days and actually create features and functionality, at least on a prototype level. It's going to be much harder to differentiate. And there's going to be a bigger conversation about where do you actually build in differentiation layers, right? How do you make sure that customers understand how you're different, whether that's on a security level, whether that's on a feature level, whether that's on a business value and outcome level. Doesn't really matter. But I think as product building gets easier and faster over time, there will just be more functionality out there, almost like an abundance. And then you will have to kind of think about how do you then differentiate. And I think it comes really down to, as I said, personalization and making sure that you understand the value. And of course, that's kind of, I think, our thesis on the market. That's the reason why we exist. And we're trying to build towards that. I think there are many other great vendors that have different or maybe adjacent thesis on go-to-market in general. But that's kind of, I think, hopefully unique insight that kind of helps on that front.
Amazing, man. Love it. You lived up to the hype. Podcast hosts are the best guests. So appreciate you coming on. Before we wrap here, where should we send founders that are listening in that just want to follow along with you or maybe experiment and use the platform? Yeah,
definitely. LinkedIn is great. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. So LinkedIn, try to hit the message and just quickly say why you're reaching out, or you can also send me an email, max@minoa.io. So pretty easy to access.
Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Likewise.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.